Are we about ready to kick off? Or anybody in the police department can tell me if we got everybody on board?
I do believe we are ready there.
So, hi, this is Gary McCarthy. I want to just thank everyone for taking the time to join us tonight, be part of this process. It's again something that I think creates opportunity for the community as a whole. Look to correct some potential problems and build on opportunities and make the community stronger and more sustainable. Gonna be remiss in not thanking Jason Benitez, who's been our moderator for tonight's panel and all the panels that we've done, and he's been doing a great job keeping us focused and on task, and really thank you for your commitment to this project, Jason. Now I'll turn it over to Police Chief Clifford.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to join us. This is our business community conversation as it relates to policing in Schenectady. So we're interested to hear what you have to say about what you see the police department does for you as business owners, and also what you see how the police department interacts as it relates to person's race and ethnicity. And so we're interested and we're excited to hear what you have to say. So please speak honestly and openly. And I will turn it over to Jason, our moderator, to begin.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Mayor, and everyone on the call this evening. Thank you so much for carving out some time to be a part of this important conversation. As mentioned, my name is Jason Benitez. I go by he and him pronouns, and I currently serve as the Vice President of Talent and Inclusion at the Capital Region Chamber, and we have offices in Colony, Schenectady, and Clifton Park. I'm going to just do a few housekeeping things, and then I have a brief intro statement to read, which I will amend so that we can get to more conversation, and also go over an amended version of the community conversation guidelines, which were shared with you all. So just again, a bit of the housekeeping. If anyone, if anything comes up for anyone this evening and they need to reach out for spiritual, emotional, or other support, we do have partners from our faith community on the call. And this evening, Reverend Tim Coombs is on the call and has agreed to stay after if there's anyone that needs to connect with someone for support after the call. We also encourage anyone in need of any type of resource to also be aware that they can reach out to the Schenectady County Office of Community Services. And though their line is not staffed after hours, if a voicemail is left, there will be some follow-up to connect you with the appropriate services. And their number is 518-386-2218, and that's 518-386-2218. So thank you to Reverend Coombs, as well as the Office of Community Services for lending that support. So again, I'm just going to start here with a brief kind of intro statement to contextualize this evening. I will also go over again some of our conversation guidelines, and then we'll get right into the conversation. So as mentioned, my name is Jason Benitez. I'm currently with the Capital Region Chamber. I humbly come to this group and the work that it has been charged to do with the best of intentions and a sincere willingness to do what we can to produce meaningful, needed change. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York City, and came up to UAlbany for my college work in the mid-90s and have stayed in the region since 94. And before joining the Chamber last July, I had a 15-year career in higher ed at UAlbany, SUNY Schenectady, and then most recently Union College, where I spent just shy of 8 years. And my roles in these institutions, particularly at Union, were expressly tasked with working on the diversity and inclusion efforts on campus, and very often included engaging in difficult but needed conversation and dialogue where there may be different perspectives to kind of moderate and mediate. So I come to this with that little bit of a background. The executive order given by Governor Cuomo, if you haven't had a chance to read it, I would highly suggest doing so. But that executive order is a tacit kind of acknowledgement that there are issues and problems in the areas of policing, policies, procedures, and practices that need to improve. And that's what we are here to do, particularly when it comes to addressing the disparities that affect communities of color. So we're here collectively to help move the governor's executive order mandate forward, and this must involve the process of engaging with the community on a number of levels. So we're hopeful that this effort will lead to policy suggestions with community input, and that those policy changes will be adopted to make these issues better. We enter these phases of community conversations, and we've attempted to include as many stakeholder groups as possible. And we believe that we've been engaging a group that is fairly representative of the community and their different perspectives. So we have to be willing to listen, openly, and to dialogue frankly about these topics. And we hope that we'll be able to do some of that tonight. I'd like to close by saying that these issues we are all individuals on this call, and these issues are systemic. So with generations of chapters to the stories behind these issues. So no one call for 2 hours or one task force is going to be able to fully undo or address the challenges we face. But here we are nonetheless. And I personally choose to stay engaged. And I hope that we can count on you all to do the same. And we hope that this conversation tonight and the subsequent ones that we've been having can be the beginning steps of the work of rebuilding trust where it needs to be rebuilt, forming trust where it needs to be formed, and eventually leading to better outcomes for both our police department as well as our community. Just a little bit of the timeline. We have partners from the Finn Institute on the call, on all of the calls, and they are tabulating a lot of the notes, both given orally on these calls as well as any written testimony and comments that come in through email. And all of these notes will be compiled into a report. That report will be made available after the new year for public viewing and comment and suggestion. And then the final version of that is to be produced and submitted to the governor by April of 2021, which would hopefully and is intended to include suggestions for policy and procedure improvement. So again, we're not perfect. I don't have all the answers. I don't believe anybody on this call has all of the answers, but we're committing ourselves to stay engaged and getting involved and being a little bit more comfortable with these uncomfortable conversations. So with that, I'd like to kind of go over some of our conversation guidelines for the evening. Again, I'm not going to read all of these each of them, but I will touch on a few of them that I believe will be central to the conversation this evening. So if you do have it on your screen or on the agenda, that was sent around, I encourage you to follow along if you'd like. But let's see, I need to find it myself here. Okay, speak your truth with care. This means that it's important to be authentic and honest, but to do so knowing that there are people at different places in their learning on this call and understanding around these issues, and to be aware of the impact of our words can have. Using I statements, avoid making generalizations about any group or broad assumptions, and focus on speaking from your own experiences. Assuming positive intent, I always like to stress that one. I think all of us come to this call tonight with a desire and willingness to chip in the way we can to this conversation. So I'd like everyone to assume that the topics that we'll be focusing and discussing this evening are personal and challenging, and we all don't share the same language or experiences, but focus please on assuming that everyone is doing the best they can throughout this conversation. The ouch oops policy, if someone says something that's hurtful or a rub for someone, we encourage the person to say ouch. We will kind of say oops, or encourage the person that made the comment to say oops, and then we can kind of collectively discuss where that ouch and the oops came from. So leaning in and leaning back, if you speak up often, we ask you to kind of lean back a little bit. If you don't speak up as often, we ask you to lean into the dialogue. But however, try to remain actively engaged throughout the entire conversation. And we do encourage everyone to try to find a way to contribute at least once throughout the 2 hours or just shy of 2 hours. Listening from the heart, listening without trying to formulate what you're going to say next. Obviously, take care of yourself if you need to use the water or a restroom. And then I'd like to just kind of, again, close with many of the issues we'll discuss tonight are institutional and systemic, and as such are not necessarily the fault of anyone in this room. However, it is our collective responsibility to actively eradicate the problems within the systems we will be discussing. So again, if you'd like to see a fuller version of the community conversation guidelines, it is there in the agenda. And I'd like to just get us started. So what I'm going to do, and we've seen that this works best because taking the time to have everyone introduce themselves before we get started really can take up a lot of time. So what I'll do is I'll throw out some questions or a question. And if you would like to respond to the question, if you're on video, you can kind of hold your hand up. If you are on audio only, I ask that you maybe indicate in the chat space that you have something to contribute. I will do my best to call on everyone that raises their hand or alerts me in the chat room, and we'll do our best to hear from everyone this evening. So I would ask that as I ask a question, you introduce quickly your name and the business or organization that you represent, and then respond to the question. And hopefully that way we will get to hear from, or at least, see introductions from everyone on the call this evening. So thank you for that. So let's just jump right into it. And again, many of you probably have some of these questions in the agenda, but from your perspective, how would you describe the current status of trust between the Schenectady Police and the wider community? From your particular perspective, how would you currently describe the relationship of trust between the Schenectady Police and the wider community? Anyone who would like to get us kicked off this evening? Yes, Robert, please unmute yourself and you have the floor.
Okay, someone had to say something, all right?
Thank you.
So I'm Bob Thoreau. I'm with the Schenectady Foundation. We're the Schenectady Community Foundation nonprofit organization. We are engaged in making grants to organizations in the community around a number of issues. And just kind of give a sense of where I think my remarks will come from. In the past several years, past few years, I think we've realized that to really have an impact or a greater impact on the community means we need to get closer to the community, whereas I'd say our past had been more relationships with the nonprofit institutions that we funded, who were all great partners, but didn't necessarily, or were not necessarily in a position of really speaking for residents in the community. And so, as one example, our partnership with the city on our Thriving Neighborhood Challenge really got us much closer to listening to the perspective of residents, people who saw things in their neighborhoods that needed to change, and that provided them with a voice. And so, just with that as a backdrop, I'd say, I don't want to cop out. I'm not sure that I can, that I truly know what the status of the relationship is between the police department and residents. I can say that I've certainly seen the police department make efforts to reach out to the community. How effective those have been, I don't have a way of really gauging, but I think that what we've learned, and probably the Schenectady Police Department, through some of what they've done with outreach, I've learned is that this is all about relationship. This is about actually getting to know each other as people to the extent possible. And no, not every police officer can know every resident of the city, of course, but breaking down the barriers of I happen to be wearing a badge, or I happen to be wearing a hoodie, or I'm wearing a business suit, so that we can really talk very plainly, like what's happening in these meetings tonight, I think is a really critical thing to do. And relationships and trust are developed over time. And so, whatever we're talking about tonight, and however we would gauge, for example, what do residents believe about the Schenectady Police Department, I think it's something that be ongoing and becomes part of a culture. I guess I'm not in a position to really be able to make a call on what I know to be the culture, for example, within the police department. I know they work on a lot of these things. I know they work on trying to create connections in the community. So we see the effort. I believe residents see the effort. I think what may be on a regular way of checking in between the department, between residents, in a way that's meaningful to the residents. I don't know what that means. Or focus groups or surveys or all of the above. But I think when I think about trust, which is really what I think we're talking about here, it are vulnerabilities, and I think the police department has acknowledged that some things have not really their strengths, and other things have been their strengths. So that's part of being vulnerable and being open. So I think that's really how it's simplistic, but setting a culture somehow where there does feel to be openness, where people feel like they can come to the police department and they're not concerned about coming to the police department because of fear of something could happen to them. And I think that trust gets developed over time. It gets proved every day by how police officers interact with residents. So I would be interested in understanding, and I know this is an input session, but at some point, maybe this is published, ways in which the police department tries to assess, how residents are feeling about their interactions with the police. And that would, present some, I think, actionable data. We start to break down some of the real or perceived, really create that trust. So someone had to say something, so I did.
Great. Thank you, Robert, for kicking us off. And again, while this is the quote unquote business leaders meeting, feel free to speak from a personal standpoint if you'd like. We're just individuals trying to have a conversation today. And there are times where you might be able to frame a question from a business owner's perspective, but there can be times where you can also feel free to chime in just as an individual. So again, I'm going to leave that question out there for anyone else that would like to respond to it. How would you currently describe the current status of the relationship between the Schenectady Police and the wider community?
Hey, Jason, this is Stacy Rowland from Rivers. I'll chime in. How you doing?
Yes, please. Good.
So I just this is kind of a two-part answer, maybe even three-part. One, our Rivers Casino, it's where I'm from. We have a very good relationship with the Schenectady Police Department. They patrol, we communicate. One thing, Marissa, who is my colleague and is on this call, we had a conversation. We were thinking that what might be good. So we are not only a business in the community, but 65% of our employees live in Schenectady. So it really is Schenectady community. But when they see the police officers there, they're in uniform, they're patrolling, or taking out a bad actor, or delivering, notification about a bad actor. But we were thinking, we have events that we have holiday parties for our team members. We have outdoor picnics for our team members. It might be nice for our team to see the police officers attend out of uniform. Everyone looks different out of uniform. And unfortunately, for some people, when you see a police officer in uniform, you get your back up and you lose a sense of comfortability. But when you see someone in plain clothes with their family, with their loved ones, you get a different perspective that you don't always get, because sometimes the interaction that people have had with police officers is only in distress of one way or another. And so we would like to when things are, hopefully after we get through this pandemic and we can gather and be a little more of ourselves anyway, it would be nice to have, them part of we call our employees our team, the team members, our family, to have them incorporated in that way, so that our team, who are residents of the city, can get to know their police officers. They can get to know our team because, people are different based on where they live, how you grew up, from what you eat, from what you talk, how you pray, all of that stuff. And so it'd be nice to kind of get a perspective firsthand rather than one that you either read on the news or someone else has told you. And I will tell you that, and Chief Clifford knows this, the start of, it's not the start. I will say the start of more people being interested in Black lives. I texted Chief Clifford and thanked him for what he did during the demonstration in Schenectady, because as a mother of a 20-year-old Black man, every time he leaves the house, I fear for him. When I dropped him off at college, I said, I'll give you 2 pieces of advice. Raise your hand even if you already know the answer, because that could be the difference between a and an A minus. And 2, make friends with the campus police. That way they don't harm you. And I shouldn't have had to say that, but I did. But Chief Clifford has always been responsive. When my daughter was buying a house, I asked him about the address. Very good. I honestly believe that he is so well intended, and which shows by this. So that's my 2 cents.
Hey, Jason, this is Kirk Lewis. Can you hear me?
All right. We believe Jason may have lost his connection, so Go ahead, and if Jason gets back, you'll already be talking.
Okay. So I'm Kirk Lewis, the Executive Director of Schenectady ARC. We are located, our administrative headquarters and our healthcare clinic are in downtown Schenectady. We have 7 houses located throughout the city, as well as another 14 houses located throughout the county. But yeah, I would echo what the previous speaker said with respect to, as in our professional relationships with our homes and interactions we've had in our downtown location, we've had very good relationships with the Schenectady Police. We work with people. Sometimes individuals we support have behavioral issues. Sometimes they get into some problems. We've found tremendous respect from the police for the people we support and for our advice on how to work with them and how to help us work with them when we've needed to have the police intervene. So that aspect has been very positive. But like Rivers Casino, I think we have a large workforce. We have over 500 employees. We have a number of employees who live in the city of Schenectady. We have a number of employees who are Black or persons of color. And I do know we had a number of those employees who were participating in the demonstrations and the events that occurred this summer after the murder of George Floyd. And I know our employees, the employees who are minorities, who are who have a different status other than the mainstream white person, they view the police differently. And so I applaud the efforts of Chief Clifford. I was on the earlier conversations when the chief very candidly apologized for actions by the Schenectady Police in the past. And I also was very aware of his actions at the initial demonstrations earlier this summer, and I think that was a brave thing to do, and I hope that opens the door to continuing dialogue like this, because I do think we need to continue to work to build that trust for all people, so that someone doesn't have to say to their young male son, try to be friendly with the police so you aren't afraid. we did start this summer. We started a group working on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we've had some of the uncomfortable conversations that I think that work requires. And from that, I've learned that people of color, a black person, thinks about their community and thinks about those interactions in a much different way than I do. I don't have to worry about, or at least maybe I don't think I have to worry about being mistreated, being prejudged, being subjected to a differential standard. But a lot of the people who work for us do. And so as an employer, as someone who's trying to help people with disabilities make their way in the world, we applaud the efforts of the Schenectady Police, and we look forward to working with you in every way we can to build that trust and to build the relationships, because you are a critical part of the community, and we need to continue to work with you to make this a strong community, because that benefits us all.
Well, Kirk, it's Lieutenant McLaughlin from the police department. I'm going to step in temporarily for Jason as he's trying to resolve his connection issues. Your points are valid and well received. I think that it's something that we obviously take to heart here, and it's something that we're going to continue to note in the report. Does anybody else want to add in on that, or shall we move on to the next question?
Jim's one go.
Jim, go ahead, sir.
Hi, this is Jim Salengo. I'm the executive director of the Downtown Schenectady Improvement Corporation, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate in these discussions. I've sat in on a variety of them or watched them after the fact online, and I think there's been some very good input. And then, tonight specifically thinking about the focus on the business community. Our organization, we're a downtown-based organization that provides additional services for the business owners, the property owners in downtown. But looking at this topic, I guess I can look at it twofold, because in one sense, we are our own independent organization that operates in downtown with our own staff and our own mission and our own resources to do what we do for the community. But then in another sense, we are an organization that advocates for and represents the overall business community for downtown. So we did do some outreach to some of our business owners. I was very happy to see that some of them were asked to be on this conversation this evening. So I hesitate to chime in for them, give them the opportunity to speak on their own. But by the very nature of what we do, and I'll echo what Kirk and Stacy were saying, that we as an organization have an extremely positive working relationship with the police department for everything from having to do community events and having to do road closures and special events and everything that goes along with how we operate downtown. It's very positive, as we have a great working relationship with everybody in the city. We also do have an outside maintenance team that is out there 7 days a week, and we have several men of color that work on the team, and we have a variety of ages. And I have spoken to them, and their indications are to me is that they feel that their relationship when they're on their job, when they're in the uniform, that the police department understands what we're there to do, understands that we're an important part of the community, and does show them partnership and respect, which is great. I would imagine that out of uniform, there's probably some of the similar questions that they may have. I think that gives them a feeling of empowerment when they can show that they are with an organization when they're in the downtown. If they come down on their own time and they're dressed in their regular clothing, it's harder for me to get a sense of how they would feel. But I can imagine that they would echo some of the similar comments that we heard from our earlier speakers in the community. But I just think it's important to point out the fact that, again, these relationships, this community building is really important. from that business sense. The one thing I just did want to speak about that I just can't say is important enough is the whole aspect of something that really several years ago, really beefed up a lot was that boots on the ground beat cop presence in the downtown. And some of our business owners can, I'm sure, speak to it more directly. But when that took off and began in earnest, I think, with Officer Contapasis several years ago, that was a sea change from our perspective, from the business owner perspective, because all of a sudden, with that daily representation, that person that you had their cell phone number, they popped into the businesses regularly, spoke to everybody. That really created that essence that I've heard so many other speakers, not tonight specifically, but on some of the other calls, is creating those relationships so you have a better understanding as a person to a person, the relationship between the SPD and the community. And I've seen that just change things so dramatically. The business owners feel like they have a resource, and we have tons of businesses, all types of ethnicities, all types of businesses. We really look at downtown as almost Schenectady's overall community, because we are the central business district, and there's a lot of great local businesses down there. So I think that the focus on that boots on the ground, the focus on that community should be a major focus, not just for downtown, but something that the SPD should really think about, because I've seen the positive result from it. I've heard the great feedback from the business owners. The feedback I've gotten prior to this meeting is primarily positive based on that relationship. So that's, again, from that downtown business perspective, that's something we wanted to share about the overall feeling in our community.
Thank you, Jim, and I'm back, folks. My mama always said that one missing clown shouldn't stop the circus, so I'm glad that you went on ahead without me, and we have some people on backup to handle that. And Stacy, I apologize if I cut out in the middle of your comments, so I appreciate it. I had a little bit of a glitch there, and I lost the internet on both the laptop and desktop, so but I'm back, so thank you, and I'm glad to see the conversation is still going. And I see Omira. Myra, you had your, you wanted to respond to this question. So glad to see you on the call this evening, Omira.
Hi, my name is Omira, thank you. And I'm representing here the Schenectady Foundation. But as I'm listening to what's being said, I want to change my hat here. Most of my interactions are actually with Schenectady youth, more specifically middle schoolers, high schoolers. And when that weekend that there were all sort of demonstrations happening throughout the Capital District, I was really worried because, as you all know, they were not very peaceful. And I was really concerned about the state of mind of the youth that I work with regarding what could be happening in Schenectady. I was so relieved seeing how the situation was handled in Schenectady. I was so proud. And in fact, the day after, I was making phone calls to all the families that we work with. And I want you to know that the youth I work with, they were expressing how relieved also they were feeling that what happened in Schenectady is not what happened, let's say, in Albany. Just a story, one of the students we work with, African American, I was asking, so how are you feeling? How are things going? And he was explaining how their family does. When they go out, if dad is out or if one of them is out, they're checking constantly via text and phone calls about how they're doing, where they are. They constantly want to know where they are and know that they're fine. And I remember when Stacy mentioned the story with her son, I'm thinking exactly of that. That shouldn't be the case. With the program that I run, it happened that just like a week later of all these events, we were going to have people from the New York State troopers, their forensics division, speaking to our audience. And I have to admit, I was a bit concerned. I was like, oh, how are they going to take this? We're bringing the police in a moment that, different people will have different feelings about it. And I here want to piggyback on what Bob said about building relationships. This group was pretty much talking about a day in their lives, the kind of problems they have to solve. Granted, this was in the context of forensics, but nevertheless, it was such a positive experience for the students to have a better understanding on the scenarios, on the situations that they face on a daily basis and the problems they have to solve. That's building relationship. That's building understanding. And I was very happy to see that there were students that wanted to connect. There were students that wanted to learn more and asking questions. Oh, I want to do that. And I'm just throwing that out there, in the scope of building relationships, things that can be done to better understand each other. It's sharing life, it's sharing experiences, and that brings a better understanding from each side because it goes both ways. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Amira. Anyone else would like to respond to that question? If not, I have others I can bring up. Yes, Marissa.
Hi, how are you? I'm Marissa Riggy from Rivers Casino, as well as Stacy. Just to reiterate on what Stacy said, we really took it upon ourselves to have some conversations with our team members, and I wanted to provide some feedback that we received from them. And I would like to say that it was a mixed response in regards to whether or not they trust the police. And I wanted to share one in particular. On the side of this individual did not trust the police. He said he did not see police in his community outside of patrol cars. His little niece was afraid of police officers, and he tried to change her opinion from the get-go. And I think that there's ways as a community that we can do better to build that relationship. And like Stacy said, we want to see police at our team member events. We have 65% of our population in the Schenectady community. Engaging with our team members, building that relationship so we can build up that trust.
Great. Thank you, Marissa. Appreciate that testimony. Again, to the best extent possible, the executive order really attempts to look at racial disparities. So, to the best extent possible in your responses, if you can kind of use that as a lens at which you respond, knowing that the mandate really is to address a number of things, but expressly mentions the racial disparities that can exist. So moving on to a different question. From your perspective and as business owners or individuals, what are the top 2 issues you believe are the greatest problems within the Schenectady community? Top 2 issues that you believe are the greatest problems in the Schenectady community. Yes, Marissa.
Sorry, I know I just spoke.
No apologies. No apologies required. Please go ahead.
I would say, from my perspective, I think 2 of the greatest issues in Schenectady currently are public safety, and secondary is food insecurity. I know we have a lot of individuals who have been struggling to put food on their tables since COVID-19 has begun, and even before so. We've been lucky to work with some organizations that help out in that sense. But, and again, public safety, we have team members who, when they go home, they don't necessarily feel safe in their neighborhoods. And I think that's a really important thing that we should strive to do better, once again, is within that public safety realm.
Thank you. Anyone else from your perspective, top 2 issues that you believe are the greatest problems within the Schenectady community?
Okay, I'm Erin Hundley. I own Red Door Beauty and Wellness.
Yes, please go ahead.
So this is just being in the community, over time and growing up in Schenectady and being around, like the neighborhoods like J. Burrell Park, The Hill. And I noticed that whenever we have events, it gets uncomfortable because the police are always there, but not in like an inviting. There may be like 2 police officers, and that's I think I forgot his last name, but either way, he is normally there with another gentleman, and it's nice, you know. But some of the other police that come kind of swarm around, it becomes very uncomfortable and intimidating because the cars are just parked up on the side where the the parks are, or they're over in the back, or they're riding through. It's like we can't gather. I understand things happen in group settings, but sometimes they're actually positive. And that kind of energy, when it's like just brought out, it makes it uncomfortable, and then it brings out a different energy, like energy begets energy. So if you're coming with a semi-hostile intent because you're anticipating or expecting the community to act as such, then you're going to get that reaction. Whereas if you can come in a different way, if you want to come and interact with the community, come on, but don't come and watch over. That's uncomfortable and it's intimidating.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. And I saw Robert, you had a response.
Yeah, in terms of the issues, I think first and foremost, disconnected youth. We all know that there are far too many youth that are not making it successfully through high school, and don't really have a pathway or view as to what they're going to do with their lives, where they can work, how to get connected to jobs. And that's pretty scary. And it's got to be, I'm sure, a concern. I'm sure it is a concern of law enforcement when there are a lot of young men who may not have a means to support themselves financially. There's a lot of things that can fall out from that. So disconnected youth, I would say, is first and foremost. The issues, of course, all these things are kind of systemic. I would agree with Marissa. Food insecurity is there as well. And again, it's hard to pull these things apart when you've got sort of an embedded part of your population in poverty. There's so much there that's kind of hard to pull out as a separate issue. But I would call those two things out as extremely high priority.
Robert. Yes, we are aware at the outset of this task force that while this task force in particular is looking at policing, that much of this conversation is involving interconnected issues that require more holistic approaches comprehensively, whether it's drug use and abuse, crime, or poverty, or other issues that are affecting communities. So we while we're trying to narrow the lens and the focus today, there is an acknowledgement that there are many layers to the onion. Yes. Anyone else would like to respond to that? From your perspective, the top two issues that you think are the greatest problems in the Schenectady community?
I have one. I have some.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so like I said, growing up in Schenectady and having family and just being a part of this community, there's like what is his name? He was just speaking. I don't know his name, but how he was saying there's no pathway. There's nothing to do. There's no transportation. There's no access to necessities. It's like everything is centralized and it's beautiful and it's great. It's downtown or it's, uptown, but it's like this gaping hole right in the center of Schenectady. So how do we connect those dots? That's the thing. How do we get the kids things to do that, bring interest? How do we entertain them?
Thank you.
So this is Stacy. I'm just going to jump in and kind of both of whatever combine what everyone said is that when you just said there is nothing to do and the gaping hole and poverty and all of that, it's employment. Freedom is financial freedom is wonderful, and a mentorship, some sort of program that being part of a business that is in Schenectady bringing up people, so that there is a sense of change. They can do something. There's hope instead of hopelessness. I would even say, in the police officers that I meet and deal with, there are not many that look like the community. And, like it or not, most people, when you walk in a room, you get a sense of comfort when there are people that look like you in that room. So in that too, if there's some sort of recruitment, I'm not sure what is going on, whether or not is the requirement to live in the city. I'm not quite sure what there is, but it would be a great career if the career itself was not frowned upon by certain members of color in the community.
Thank you, Stacy. Anybody else have a similar or different perspective? Okay. We lightly touched on the concept of community policing, or the community working together with the police. So community policing involves police officers working with community members to identify the root causes of crime and other issues, and then working alongside the community to offer a range of activities that seek to reduce those negative issues. Given that definition, to what extent do you think the Schenectady Police Force practices community policing?
This is Abby from the J Street Business Association. I don't think my chat thing's working.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So I just think that the community policing is great. At least we're down on J Street, and we have a cop that's specifically supposed to walk our beat and everything, and he does a great job talking to the community, answering questions, being present. I know throughout COVID his duties have kind of changed, and I mean, we can definitely notice when his presence is not there. There seems to be a higher, homeless population that I would, for lack of the better words, camp out on J Street and stuff when there isn't that presence. So, I mean, but overall, when things are normal and we do have the consistent presence, it definitely is beneficial for us.
Thank you. And yes, I want to remind that this is not solely about identifying the issues, but also potential solutions. So when and where possible, if you have, in your statement, want to propose something that that you think would make these issues better, or if you bring up a challenge to offer a potential solution, we certainly would like to hear that as well. And as we move into the second hour, really we'll kind of try to focus more on solution responses. But would anyone else like to chime in on the concept of community policing and how well you think the Schenectady Police Department practices that effort of community policing? Kirk? Yes.
Hi, Jason. So, as I said, we have our administrative headquarters in downtown Schenectady. We have a lot of people in and out of our facility. We have a large parking lot between our building and Erie Boulevard, and we've seen, I think, like Abby said, we've seen a real benefit when we do notice, the police either on foot patrol or on bike patrol. It makes our employees feel safer going out into the lot at night. It reduces, we have had people camping out in some of our places, and it seems to have varied some. It seems to me like we saw more foot patrols and maybe more police on bikes, and maybe it's COVID, maybe it's budget things. But I do think it builds relationships, and it builds that trust, and it makes people feel better about the areas where they're working, and and better about bringing people in and out. We have a lot of people who come and visit our site for different purposes, and again, we've seen some real good examples of it in downtown. And I guess I think we would benefit from more, even though I do know it poses budget challenges.
Thank you, Kirk. And yes, for the sake of tonight's conversation, let's try to imagine that that budgets and staffing are not barriers. I know that's difficult to envision, but we really want to try to throw as many responses or suggestions out there, however idealistic. And so we see that Rob is agreeing in the chat room that visibility both on foot and bike is helpful. So thank you, Mr. Lewis. Yes, Jim, please.
I know I spoke a little bit earlier about kind of the overall concept of the community policing and somebody being on the street and having a regular presence. I think, as Kurt said, even more of that, because as I think about so many activities, so many events happen in the downtown that draw heavily from the surrounding communities. And what I've been very happy to see is the police department having a presence on, for example, summer night. I mean, brings down, non-COVID times, of course, but brings down tens of thousands of people, many of them from the surrounding communities. And when you see that dunk tank with the kids interacting with the police and seeing them as just like them, and it's actually wonderful to watch. And I think more things like that are great. I was extremely pleased to see at the Pride Festival last year that an officer got up representing the SBD to speak about his support of the LGBTQ community and really putting them in the public eye with a lot of people in attendance, all ages, races, ethnicities. It was very positive. So I think consciously taking more steps like that, where even if you can't go to every single community meeting, even if you can't go to have a beat cop in every single neighborhood, I think identifying those areas where you're going to be having a large amount of people and the most impact as possible, showing your connection to the community and giving people that opportunity to interact, I think is key. And I just love to see more of it.
Thank you. Anyone else like to offer a response?
Jason, am I on?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is I'm Debbie Budraj from Tropics Restaurant in Schenectady, and I do agree with the other participants that having police presence is definitely a plus for businesses, and we've asked for that numerous times. And I think if it were an option where maybe businesses can compensate or pay for patrol, if that was necessary, it'll definitely be a good thing for businesses, because we don't see a lot of or as much as we'd like to see in our area because of where we're located, of police presence, whether it be in most likely patrol vehicles, because we don't see them on foot in our area.
Thank you. Thank you for offering that perspective.
You're welcome. And also, I'd like to add that what the chief did during the protesting definitely, was a good thing. And people in the area want to see that the police department is willing to work with businesses and residents, etc.
Yes, thank you. Bringing, what that's been brought up, that moment where protesters were there and the chief came out and met and spoke to them. And so I'd like to talk about, the topic a little bit more. There's been so many demonstrations going on around the world, around the nation, and in our region. And, I'm wondering, what can we do to better build a bridge of communication between the activists that are in the streets carrying a certain message or trying to bring attention to certain realities, and then the reality of the officers and what they have to encounter day to day. What would be some of your suggestions, if any, to help bridge that kind of understanding, or at least to try to better bring those two groups together, the activists that might be out there in the streets and our members of our police department? Anybody has any advice there, that would be great.
I do. I
Yes,
think
please.
a great thing would be to have a therapy session, to literally sit down and have a therapist from both perspectives, and engage with the audience and have that hard conversation of how and what a police officer experiences, right? In terms of being fearful at times of certain things that maybe they don't really want to express, but react in ways that affect people's lives tremendously. And then on the community side, this is how we feel, and we're really in survival mode because this is our life. And despite what people think that, oh, you can just do it overnight, or you can just, if you want better, you can do better. Some people don't even have, like she was saying about having hope. A lot of people are hopeless. And in order for you to really reach them, they have to be able to understand you. You have to have empathy, and you have to be able to come together and say, okay, I've experienced alcoholism in my life too. Maybe a parent or something affected you as a child. So it's like we have to come together and find our commonalities so we can really have those hard conversations and humanize each other, because it's just like, it's just so hurtful on all sides. I see all sides, but I see the main side is the side that I'm on, which is the Black side. And sometimes that side is it's very traumatizing. It's very heavy and it's stressful. And to not be able to speak a lot of times or communicate or articulate and not be seen as upset or angry, it gets frustrating. So there creates a barrier, so to speak. So it's like we have to be able to come together and our commonalities with our uncomfortableness. Your childhood trauma, what was yours? Were you molested as a child? Were you, these are things that, not saying you have to put that on Broad Street, but these are things that we all deal with. So we have to have those hard conversations. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you for that, and speaking your truth and bringing up the trauma that is existing in the community, because it's certainly there, as well as the trauma that our officers experience. And community healing circles, if done well, and it can be very productive. So certainly, again, we have research partners from the Finn Institute that are taking notes behind the scenes on all these calls. So any suggestion that is mentioned is something that will be included in the official record. So again, thank you for bringing up that point.
I'll go. This is Justin Moore from Rivers Casino. I look back to when we did have the protesting and the demonstrations and the acts that the Schenectady PD took to really humanize themselves and be part of the message rather than be against it. What's impactful to me with that scenario is that was brought to the doorstep of the police department, and that it was the community that initiated the demonstration and interaction with our police force. And I think it would go a long way if the police force initiated that type of interaction with the community, rather than the community starting it and bridging that. Have an opportunity where the police force opens up and says, "Hey, we're here. We're gonna be in the community today at this location at this time, and we're here to listen to your voices and hear your concerns." And I think that would be, it's a more proactive approach rather than reacting to.
Justin, thank you for that. it does appear that Jason may be having those technical difficulties again. So again, we apologize. But is there anybody else that wants to add in on this topic? Obviously, bringing up the fact of having the police department initiate it is an excellent point. Is anybody? Robert, go ahead, sir.
Well, yeah, I don't. I just want to agree with those speakers, and I know I'm aware, for example, at the probably late spring, early part of the summer, members of the police department met with young people at the Boys and Girls Club. It was, I believe, a facilitated conversation. I think that is exactly the kind of thing that probably most of the community isn't aware of, but that becomes kind of an ongoing sort of way of operating. And I think having kind of a good neutral facilitator who, especially if we're talking about young people or community members who they feel comfortable with, I think it's really helpful to break down the barriers to understand that we're all people, and we have our own vulnerabilities. And my guess is, I say this too. I've always said there's two jobs that I could never do, and I know I would be terrible at. One would be a police officer. It's just I can't imagine how difficult it is. Officer being a teacher in a school district. So I do think that kind of facilitated off event thing, but just kind of a continuous process would be enormously helpful.
And I think we definitely are taking that to light and agree with you. I think one of the things I might want to expand on a little is, does anybody have any recommendations in the COVID world that we're living in to be able to do that so that we are continuing that or implementing that now? I know that's a tough question to ask, but as we all deal with the video teleconferencing, we're not exactly sure that that's always the best method, but we're open to suggestions. Does anybody have any for right now to act immediately on?
Well, there could be messaging to the community that you would like to host meet and greets and communicate to them what topics. We're going to have a series of like the Schenectady Police Officer Series, and you're soliciting topics to discuss. You're formulating these in a safe environment. When we can do it, we can let you know all of that. Something along those lines. I would also suggest that training, if you do have training, which I'm sure you do, the public should know about it. A lot of the issues with the mental health have caused great tragedies. You have families that call for help for somebody and he ends up getting killed because there's not an understanding of how to handle it. And so you may find yourself with a family that is a member is having an issue, and they will not call for fear that it will not be handled properly.
Thank you, Stacy. If I'm recapping what you're saying correctly, transparency in when the training is, or opening the doors to the training?
No, transparency. You need to do your training and not have it a community meeting. But I think that there is training, that there is an ongoing process, because when you train, it means you want to do better. It's like working out. You gotta want to do it, to get better. Just so everyone knows, you're just not thrown in a uniform, given a gun, and said, "Go ahead."
So I have a comment here. It may not answer your short-term question in terms of what do we do now in the midst of the COVID era. But I agree with everything that has been said. I've also seen some of these interactions with the activists and the police where there's a lot of anger. And sometimes it's easier to start the conversation if we start with something a little bit less intimidating, where the guards are a little bit down, and then just warm up to the conversation. And I don't know, something that crosses my mind is something like the tables where people go and play chess in front of proctors in the summer. Is that a way of starting just those informal interactions? And it is by starting in that non-intimidating setting that then it can lead to other things. So I agree with everything, these forums, etc. But let's not forget the simple approaches. And I don't want to say simple by, meaning oversimplifying things here, but most relationships start that way. And just wanted to throw that out there.
My apologies, folks. This is our fourth or fifth call, and the first time I'm having this many issues on my end with the connectivity. So I know it can be distracting, and I don't want it to detract too much from the conversation. So I apologize. I'm doing the best I can to stay connected, and I'm now using my cell phone as a hotspot. So let's see if that works. So thank you. Another reality of COVID and virtual world. I didn't want to cut off the conversation if anyone was still replying to the question there. Okay. Just a thumbs up if people can hear me. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, we have just about 50 minutes. Let's try to really focus, on some solutions. What can we do to fix these issues from your perspective? So let's just kind of put a real general question out there, like, what do you want to see? What would you do to improve the Schenectady Police Department? If you could wave a wand, if you could have, if resources and staffing were not issues, what would you offer to this evening's conversation for the task force to consider on improving the current status?
Okay. I have something that I've been kind of thinking about. When I read over the policy that we had from last time, they talked about how annually they would be going over, incident, right? And then comparing it year to year. Well, I think that's too far apart. I feel that it should be quarterly, and it should be gauged in the sense of incident, like a rise of incident or a decrease in incident. And then you compare it year to year from that. And then from there, find trend. Is this, is around this time of year more heightened? If so, why? Right? And then that way you can kind of target what the root of the issue is potentially, right? Because now you're able to really get down to the nitty gritty by having data. So I think it's just, I think a year assessment is too long. It should be quarterly. And then at the end of that year, it should be then assessed and compared, like that. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes, thank you for that statement. This process here with the task force, as well as, a lot of processes involved looking at data, seeing what trends jump out at you from that data, and then trying to adjust accordingly. So point well taken on the need to be looking at data and collecting it.
Stacy here, people of color from the community. Recruit from within the community. So there's known entities patrolling, walking. See a police officer in a uniform that has your skin color. That offsets the level of uncomfortability you may have.
Thank you, Stacy. Others, suggestions for improvement.
Jason, I
Justin,
think,
Oh, go ahead. Deb, and then we'll come to Kirk. Please, go ahead, Deb.
okay, Jason, I was thinking at an early age, if the kids in Schenectady get to know the police, the police in the Schenectady department, so maybe like a fun event once a year, meet your Schenectady PD members, you know, so the kids get used to them at an early age and don't feel like, oh, only when I get in trouble I'm going to see the you know, the police. Maybe a meeting in the school once, you know, a fun event in the school once a year.
Just to add to what you were saying, I don't know what your name is. It just popped in my head, like you said, like, you know, having something. Well, how about when the kids graduate, or, you know, celebrate with them, you know, go to their events and be there with them so they know you. And you're, like she said, you're not just showing up when something bad happens. Like, literally go, like, all the time, as much as you can, so that way you start to build that rapport with the young ones.
Thank you. Kirk, did you want to chime in, sir?
Yeah, just two thoughts. One, I wanted to second what Stacy was saying about investing in recruiting and bringing in people from the city. You know, having a police force that looks like the community it serves, I think, is hugely important and goes a long way to building that trust and building the bridges. The other thought I had is, and it goes back to some of what I heard from the community session, and I'm not real familiar with it, but there's a lot of distrust, I think, among some members of the community about the process the force has for investigating issues, problems, you know, misconduct among its own members. And I think part of that is that the initial stage of that review, if there's a complaint, it goes to a board that is made up. It's an internal review board with the police department. And then if it passes that level of review, it then goes to an external board. And I think we need a process there that the community can trust, because there are going to be problems. You know, the best force, people will make mistakes, and the community has to have faith in the process that's there, that it will protect all the people, and it has to look like something that everyone can believe in. So I think investing in that is a critical matter. And I'm an attorney by training. I believe in due process and fairness for everyone, and that's difficult for the community at times, because that means protecting the rights of the officer as well as looking out for the rights of someone who may have been a victim. But I think there are ways you can do that will let everyone see it is a fair process, and that it is a process that will lead to a just result. But I do think that's going to take some money and some effort.
Great. Thank you, Kirk. As a follow-up, can anyone follow up with suggestions on the recruitment question? Certainly, you know, the police department wants to make efforts to reach a broader applicant base for open positions, and social media blasts, website, and even the judicial routes. Are there any other suggestions on this call for other things that the department could be doing to diversify recruitment efforts and hopefully diversify applicants that apply? Yes, Marissa, and then Robert.
I'm sorry, my internet cut out for a second. But I really think that when it comes to recruitment, and especially if you want a police force that looks like the community, I think it needs to start in the education system. And whether it start in middle school or elementary school, I think it's important to carry that education all the way through, so that children and youth know the expectations for when they grow up, if they want to be a police officer, what they have to do to get to that point.
Thank you. Robert?
Marissa kind of said it, but, you know, what is that path to become a police officer, or some of the community organizations, the Boys and Girls Club, Cocoa House, you know, other organizations where you can reach kids who are, you know, I don't know the right age, maybe it's middle school, because in middle school, I think kids are really at a point where they're starting to put together who they are and what they could become, and understanding that this is what it means to be a police officer. This is why this is such an important job, and why you would be an important addition to our police department, or any police department, and finding ways to encourage them down that path. They may or may not use that path in the end, but that it is an option to them, and what it means to be a police officer. And again, that's about breaking down, into relationships and understanding what those pathways are. So I would just say, I know that's being worked on to some degree, but just more of it if there's more resources.
Thank you.
Jason, can I just add it, Stacy? I just want to add with the starting in school, it's, who knows what they want to be when they grow up. So starting at a young age might not, but what that does is has involvement in a police officer in a young person's life. And it'd be a good involvement rather than a bad one. So then the image of becoming a police officer is one that is not frowned upon, but one that is a good one. So that is changing the image of what a police officer is, because right now everyone's home. The news is on. We've been home for months. All anyone has seen is clash between people of color and police officers. So right now, people of color do not want to be police officers. And so if you get them young in knowing them and them knowing you personally, that changes the optics of becoming a police officer.
Yes. Thank you again. Yes. Appreciate that. Yes, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention Heather Peterson, who's my board president. We've been communicating a little on the talk, and something we've been discussing, and actually follows up perfectly with what Stacy was just saying, is that as important as it is to have that police presence at community events and showing that human connection and interacting, I think it's also important to identify a sphere of influence, if you will, in the community itself that can bridge that positivity between the department and the community, and by having a trusted group of folks that perhaps a young person could look to say, get feedback from and say, we are working with the department. We are building these bridges. We want to show you the positive aspects that can come out of these relationships. Having that sphere of influence, however that would be, whether it would be creating an ongoing group like this with some of the people handpicked that would be members of the community that could help, stretch across the communities. Could be another way looking at making those positive changes instead of just trying to put all of the onus on the department themselves for making the changes. Sort of create those influence clusters on both sides and see if they can work together to help everybody.
Yes. If I'm hearing correctly, some like ambassadors, diverse community ambassadors that can be the conduit or the glue or the bridge to bring the community that they might be representing together along with the police officers in a positive and productive way.
Right, because if you can have that very honest conversation with somebody you trust, whether it's a teacher or whether it's a business owner or a member of the faith community, you can have that open and honest conversation with them about what they're feeling, what the good is, what the bad may be. Again, there's that extra step in there that can help bridge that relationship, and I think ambassador is a perfect term for that thought process.
Great, thank you. Again, we have a little over a half an hour. I'd like to just throw a different question out there. Our police officers are often called to address issues called to situations where, in an ideal situation, another agency or resource in the community could have at times prevented or at minimum assisted in bettering the outcome. what would you offer as to ways that we can expand the conversation around the issues facing our communities beyond just the role of policing?
I think it would be kind of great if the officers could get to know the healing community, you know, and get to know like the work that they're truly doing and making a difference and impact in the surrounding communities that maybe you don't necessarily see. But I think just really getting to know, because that healing part of the community is like the heart, you know, so they have access to the community. So I think just kind of taking that approach in a sense would be helpful.
Thank you. Again, this most recent question speaks to, other community resources or agencies that could be working in conjunction with police, because right now often police are called in crisis situation or called to deal with or respond to a situation where a possible other resource could have been part of that, bettering that outcome. So can we just expand, how can we expand the conversation around the issues facing communities beyond the role, simply the role the police force plays? Robert, did you have your hand? I'm sorry, because of my low connection, I've lost video on some of you, so please feel free to just unmute and chime in.
Okay, thanks, Jason. I'm aware, and others are probably aware. I mean, there have been programs launched in other cities around the country. I think more probably out sort of western part of the country, where there are really focused more on mental health, and recognizing that that's a tremendous issue in most communities. And if someone's having distress because of their mental health, maybe a police officer is not the best first intervention. And so there's a lot of programs and research on this, but there are teams of EMTs and mental health professionals who will be essentially the first responders to those situations, so that an officer who's not trained per se trained to fully understand mental health issues doesn't have to be there, unless, of course, there is some sort of safety issue that requires an officer to be on site. So that's probably a better deployment of community resources than having officers be the first point of intervention for mental health issues. And it ought to be a priority, I think, not just for the city, but for the state, to be helping cities to deploy teams like that. So officers can focus on the things that officers do best. And mental health therapists and professionals focus on what they do best.
Thank you. That is certainly a topic that has come up on other calls, is the need for more resources in the mental health area, and just in general, reducing the stigma around even talking about mental health in our communities. Okay, we've got about 30 minutes left. Again, another question. If you can project forward past this task force process, what would the ideal police department look like for you? What are some things that are currently present that you'd like to see less of? What are some things that you'd like to see more of? If you could, again, kind of explain your ideal version of a police department in your community and police community relations, what would that look like? And, I want to kind of stress that the importance of interaction has been noted. It's been a trend on this call and others. And I'd like to really, dig a little bit deeper and kind of encourage, are there other things beyond just positive community and police interaction? Is there a particular procedure that you'd like to see improved? Is there a particular police tactic that you'd like to see challenged? Just trying to dig a little bit deeper here. I want to really try to concentrate this last half hour on tangible, actionable, procedural things that can actually influence and shift policy beyond the conversation, although necessary and important, just a little bit beyond and digging a little bit deeper beyond the community and police interaction.
What about if, like, Stacy, I think earlier she mentioned, making their training public, right? So the public knows, okay, this is the training. But what if we take it one step further and have documented which officers have completed which training and the date? Because if they're, and yet have also listed the date that training should have been done by, because some trainings I know are remote. So, especially with COVID. So see how long, because that's showing initiative. That's showing that they're taking the time to say, I want to be a part of this and I want to do better. Like she said, you're training. So that means that you want to do better. So I think something along that line.
Okay. So calling for more transparency in the training process.
When
Again,
it comes to training,
please, yes, go ahead, Amira. No, I'm sorry, I lost the video, so I can't. So feel free to just unmute and chime in if you hear a quiet moment. So go ahead.
So when it comes to the training, I understand the visibility part, which is really important. But what about the police itself sponsoring training that people can find of value? And one example that comes to mind is when it comes to safety, personal defense for women, for instance. And maybe it's not the police itself running it, but maybe they can host it because it's somehow connected, related to the safety component. But having the community feeling that I can come to the police department, I'm going to get something out of it, something positive, I'm going to learn something new, I'm going to grow somehow, and I'm going to feel safe. And that's another avenue to actually make the personal connection and build the trust.
Thank you, Amira. So looking into options or opportunities for some type of personal or professional development resource that the officers or the police department can bring to the community. Anyone else would like to respond? Again, projecting forward past this task force process, if you were to look to the ideal situation of what the police and community relationship and the police department might look like, what would that look like for you? Is there things you'd like to see more of, less of, when compared to today? As specific as possible and as actionable as possible would be best.
So, just a couple of things. One is, of course, in all situations, transparency speaks to everything. So I think one of the participants was talking earlier about maybe like a quarterly report to the citizens of the city, to the council, etc., on how the police are activating these ideas of reform. So there is, a regular point of feedback as to how we're doing, as well as, an ongoing way for citizens to, provide input to the department. So, that's all part of sort of a continuous improvement process, making sure that, you're being accountable, you're putting your metrics or other measures that demonstrate that in this process, for example. And then, like a pretty regular way of checking in with the citizens of the city on how they're doing.
Thank you. Anyone else? We have a little over 20 minutes. Imagining, redefining, re-envisioning the ideal police force and what that would look like is the current topic.
Like I had mentioned before, more communication between the community and the police officers. A really a communication, a heart-to-heart, knee-to-knee conversation. I suggest conversations with young Black men. What are you really going through? What are you really thinking? Because there's no way you can explain what you're going through, but no one's going to get it unless you are a young Black man. Have that conversation. No one likes to talk about uncomfortable stuff. Having chit-chat is easy. But having the hard conversations with people show you really care about them. And so open the door, have meetings, get the young organizations around to get groups together so you can have that conversation so they can voice their opinion. Their voices are not heard until something tragic happens. Just have that conversation with the group, let the organizations that have the young members work with them, get the groups together, have that tough conversation, because it could save a life.
Thank you, Stacy. Others on the call tonight? Yes, Marissa.
Yeah, so piggybacking off of what Stacy said, I think these videos have been great in bringing up tough dialogue, but in addition to having conversations with youth, I would like to see more of the younger officers having the conversations as well. So it's amazing to see the leadership on all of these meetings, but what about the officers who are out patrolling or working on the streets with the youth or making those arrests? I would love to see them more involved in the conversations.
Thank you, Marissa. We did have a session earlier today with public safety, and it included a number of officers from the Schenectady Police Department as well as other agents of safety, kind of who play that role in the community. But I agree that these things need to be ongoing and more robust. But that perspective was engaged as part of this process.
Great.
I don't want to leave the uncomfortable silence there too much. Does anybody have a maybe not a statement, but a question that you'd like others on the call to think about or answer? I really do feel like we jumped around on a lot of topics and hit on a bunch of them, but we tend to kind of end with this line of questioning at the end is like, envisioning the ideal kind of situation out past this task force process. So, I'd like to leave that as a question out there, but I'd also like to open up if there's another topic or another question that somebody would like us to discuss this evening. Yes, Robert.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't want to speak too much, but this is a great conversation, and I really appreciate what Stacy has said earlier about the hard conversation, and I'm thinking about, everything that has come out in the media this year not about the Schenectady Police Department, but about what's happened, whether George Floyd or any of the other incidents. And it's all out there in video. So everyone's seeing this. Youth are seeing this. And I think they have to understand or be able to see or be convinced that that's not what the Schenectady Police Department does, you know, and because they're getting their impression of police officers from what they're seeing in the media. And I know, and so here I am, a middle-aged white man. I know how I feel like I was driving. I was not in Schenectady, another community, and I was driving, and I noticed there was a police car, you know, parked behind a, you know, a sign, you know, basically trying to pick off speeders. I immediately tensed up, even though I was not speeding. And so if I tense up, right, in those situations, what must a young black man, what are they going through if they're feeling like, oh, there's a police car behind that building? And it got me thinking about, well, are the police more about surveillance of our citizens, or about being visible and with them? Because I felt as though, and again, here I am, I shouldn't feel this way, like I'm being surveilled by a very dark car that's hiding from me versus it's out in the open. And I should feel reassured by the presence of any law enforcement officer. It should make me feel really good. But here I was feeling distressed. And that was purely an emotional, physiological response on my part. I knew I was not in trouble, knew I was not speeding. So how can we even make the way, I don't know the answer, but the appearance of law enforcement, just how they operate, how the cars look. Think about how the automobiles look. Do they look designed to be hidden from us or to be present to us? And that's kind of a design aspect to this. And you know, I'm sure that other cities, other places have thought about things like this, but how are police uniforms designed to be even more welcoming or reassuring that we're here? So maybe there's a design part of this and simply an appearance part that helps overcome some of the probably very deeply felt emotion, physiological responses that people may have, and why someone who sees a police officer behind them or they are pulled over for some reason that they're not knowing, and they react poorly to it, right? They're feeling something. They feel like I could be in trouble, even though they're not. So I think there's a lot to overcome there, but it's even just like, how does a police department present itself to its citizens? That we may need to think about.
Thank you for those suggestions, Robert.
You know, I think about a lot of the comments that have been made tonight. Fantastic comments from the group. You know, really comes down to getting. I hear a lot of comments about getting the officers in the community. I hear a lot of comments about having conversations with young black men in the community and knee to knee and getting to know them. And you know, there's a way you can do that. And I truly believe I played sports. I'm 6'8", so I had no choice. I was roped in to play basketball. I played basketball all my life, and I know a lot of life lessons that were brought to me, and a lot of phenomenal relationships that were built, and things that carry on in my life this very day. Is there any opportunity to see the officers in Schenectady possibly even broaden it out farther to firemen and first responders, and get in the communities and create sports leagues, become coaches, start a basketball league? Officers are volunteering their time, they become coaches, teach them basketball, football, baseball, whatever the sport. It's amazing what comes from that. There's so many opportunities that you're going to be able to bring people together, mentor young men, get to know young men, help shape their lives. And now you're not in uniform, police uniform. You've got that time where you can just teach those lessons. I think that, and not only that, get the kids out of the house. Get them some exercise. It seems like there's a lot of positive win-win opportunities there. That might be a great way to bridge some gaps.
Thank you for those perspectives, Justin. Just over 10 minutes here, folks. Again, I'd like to use these last 10 minutes on, what do you want to see from the police department? Things that the task force can consider in the report. Jim?
As I'm thinking here, ever since the George Floyd incident happened earlier this year, I personally have realized or become so much more aware of what I didn't know. I realize I come from a background and a situation in life that gives me a privilege that other people do not have, but I really felt it was extremely important. I went through the whole Capital Region Anti-Racism Challenge that was put together with proctors and others. I sought out documentaries, I sought out reading material to learn about it. So I think as we're talking about ways to address the problems, I think it's also extremely important in all aspects of this discussion to talk about getting to the root causes, because I feel like I so much more fully understand the experience of being a young Black man in this country today, the history of where it came from, because it's hard to, in my position, it's not something I experience every day, and it took some effort to seek that out and learn the information, but it's helped me look at everything with a completely different perspective. So I think if we can find a way, in all instances, is to make sure that the root causes of some of this problem, or perhaps some of the mistrust between the communities, there's a way to make sure that's incentivized, to learn the history, to learn the background, I think would be extremely important and would go a long way to having even more productive conversations between the department, between members of the community, and the other way around too. I think it's really important. Heather, my board president, was saying earlier how she was in on a session this afternoon talking about getting some of the perspective from the frontline community in safety anyway. And I think it's important to understand, that perspective too, that a person understands from an officer that they trust what it's like to do their job. So again, I think this again comes down to that two-way street and really getting at the cause to have a better solution for addressing the symptom.
Jim, thank you.
Yeah, Jim, you're spot on in terms of self-development. You gotta want to learn. You gotta want to read books. There are plenty of books now, white fragility, how to be anti-racist. I could go on and on and on, but you have to want to do it. And recognizing that may help you learn something, that's part of the training. But, there are plenty of things to watch, to read, to listen to. Maybe that should be part of the training.
Thank you. Thank you both for that statement. And whether it's tonight, maybe not right now, we do have some time that folks can maybe drop some recommendations in the chat box, or again, the conversation doesn't end after tonight. There's going to be a way for all of you on this call to submit written statements. But yes, whether it's a documentary, a book, a training that you might have seen or experienced, feel free to either drop that in the chat room space tonight or, suggest it in written form to the SPD collaborative email. So I'll put one final call out there. This is the last call. Does anyone have any kind of final perspectives, comments, suggestions on everything that we discussed tonight? Again, envisioning an ideal situation after this task force process. What would that look like for you? What are some things you'd like to see more of, less of? I'd want to at least do a last call on that question before we wrap. Okay. Well, again, I apologize for the technical difficulties we had this evening. Thank you all for being so patient with me personally and with the process here. Again, my name is Jason Benitez, and I'm the VP of Talent and Inclusion at the Capital Region Chamber. And it's been my honor to be a part of this process, and we will continue to move forward with the remaining community conversations we have. And please, again, know that the conversation does not stop here, and the work does not stop here, and there is going to continually be a way for the community to suggest feedback and input throughout this process. So with that, I will turn it back over to the mayor and the chief for some closing comments. And again, stay healthy and stay safe, everyone.
Jason, thank you for your time and effort. You handled those technical glitches seamlessly, and we moved right through it. I again want to just thank everyone for participating tonight, for the work that you do in the community with your businesses, respective organizations. Schenectady is a community that's growing, it's getting stronger and better, and it's part of a rebirth that many places are looking at us and how to attract business, how to bring families in, and hopefully how to better police and provide public safety. So as Jason said, this is part of the process. It's ongoing, and we appreciate your time, effort, thoughts, and just being integral parts in making this a success. And turn it over to Chief Clifford.
Thank you, Mayor, and yes, thank you, Jason. Very good job, and thank everybody for their time tonight. Again, I know your time is valuable. I appreciate you for your spending your time. All of your discussions were heard, and we may very well reach out to you in the future to discuss some of the challenges that we face with all the topics that you brought up, as we think about them and consider how we can implement certain things and tackle some of the challenges that we face as a police department. So again, I appreciate everybody's time and effort tonight. Thank you again, Jason, for your time, and everybody have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
We still see a few folks on the call, and just a reminder that we do have Reverend Coombs on the call if there's a need for anyone to connect for support. If so, please take yourself off mute and just indicate so, and we will make sure you are connected. And thank you, Reverend, for your service tonight.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's it then. I'm going to log off. I guess if anybody needs to stay on, we have support here available for you. If not, have a great evening.
Yep,
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.